Before we start this episode, I just wanted to note that this conversation includes a discussion of death by suicide. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, help is available. Call or text 988 in the US or visit iasp.info to find a helpline in your home country. Hello, and welcome to Loneliness and You, a podcast on the research and experience of loneliness. I'm your host, Axel Seaman. My guest today is Victor M. Sweeney. Victor M. Sweeney is a licensed mortician and funeral director living in small-town Minnesota. Despite being seen by tens of millions on YouTube, most of the 1,600 people in his town know him only by his first name, and for his work planning funerals and handling their dead loved ones. He's currently developing a podcast called Death and, seeking to engage in thoughtful discussions about life, death, and those things we all share in common. A husband, father, and undertaker, Victor is grateful to be alive. Victor, welcome. I'm so pleased to have you. As we embark on our second series, we're starting with something a little bit different. We're inviting our guests to bring something to their interviews, for example, an object, piece of art, a quote that they would like to talk about. So what have you brought us?
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, Axel. So here is what I have brought. When you tasked me with bringing some things, a lot of what's in the mortuary is not all that portable. So hard for me to bring a casket and show it to you. Likewise, cannot show you dead bodies. Can't really bring embalming machines around. They're pretty heavy. But as I was thinking about loneliness, I have brought you an urn. I have a brass urn. It has inlaid enamel in a process called cloisonne. It's midnight blue, and it's one of the prettier ones we have, which is why I brought it.
It's very pretty, yeah, and tell us more.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, so here's why I brought it. So I've been thinking a lot about the idea of loneliness and how it relates to intelligibility, or maybe even familiarity. And with that in mind, when a loved one has been cremated and they are in an urn, that is a time when they are very unfamiliar. And so I've had widows and widowers bring their spouses home in an urn as opposed to leaving them in the cemetery in a casket. But when they bring their loved one home in an urn, I think they do so with the idea that it will help curb some of the loneliness. But I don't know if that's the case because their loved one is in a very unfamiliar state. You know, if a gentleman's wife has died, she is not normally encased in a jar. She's not normally sitting on a shelf or on a mantle or on the bedside table. So I guess that was kind of my thought there, that there's something about familiarity and loneliness. And maybe that is why, at least as Americans, we often want to see our dead because it's familiar to you.
Mhm.
It's comforting.
Yeah, right. A question that I very much wanted to ask you is why do so many people want to see their dead? And your answer is because it's comforting. But then even taking the urn home is comforting. But of course, it can't be the actual ash that's in there, and probably not even the urn itself, however pretty yours is. So what is it?
Yeah,
It's the memories.
I think so. I think it's the fact that you have a physical reminder of a memory,
Yeah.
or many memories, I suppose. And that is probably the driver of really why we see our dead too. And that, it's comforting, yes. But also when you see your dead grandfather, for instance, in the casket, uh, you realize you're seeing him for the last time and that there's something about his physicality that is rather more moving than a photograph. And maybe even a little bit disturbing. That happens often enough. But the fact that you can see a person, touch a person. Sometimes when I have a gentleman in the casket and there's a distinctive cologne that he's always worn, or a distinct perfume that a woman's always worn, we spray a little bit in there. Because I think engaging those senses of sight and touch and smell, especially, can bring a lot of comfort and familiarity and kind of jog memories or maybe just deep feelings about memories that I think looking at a picture Just doesn't quite do.
Mm. So is the aim for portraying something as they lie in their casket to make them as sort of lifelike as possible so that the memories flow?
Yes, and that's very strange because I once was talking to somebody about another mortician, and they were saying that we want to make them, into this kind of effigy, sort of look like themselves. But I think lifelike is kind of the ticket, even though they're dead, which seems very counterintuitive to want to make a dead person look lifelike. Uh, so, for instance, when I'm getting someone's makeup ready, everyone gets a little bit of makeup, not a lot, but some. Oftentimes, I'll put a little dot of rouge on the tip of their nose or on their hands, on their knuckles. I'll put a little rouge across each of the knuckles because I don't know if a family notices that necessarily, at least not consciously. But I think when a person views their loved one and they maybe unconsciously register that their knuckles are rosy and the tips of their ears are rosy, and that something about that, just that little tiny tweak, makes them all that more familiar and kind of settles a person, right? Like if you saw your loved one lying there perfectly pallid, right, and gray, that'd be rather disturbing. So I think that's kind of the key too, is make them look lifelike, make them look familiar.
Do you work with a photo? How do you achieve that?
Well, I'm in a privileged position, Axel. I'm in a small town, so I have 1,600 people. I think 1,605 was the was the last uh, census. So for the most part, the elderly are kind of my demographic because those are who come to a lot of the funerals. So more often than not, the person who is on the table, I know them. I've seen them in life. So I don't always need a picture. Sometimes if it's maybe a tricky case, I'll ask for one. Uh, but I'm in a position where I know most of the people. So it's a little bit easier for me to kind of not restore them even, but just return them to their family for a time.
Yeah. It's almost like the work of an artist, or it is the work of an artist that you're doing there, right? Out of
I think
memory.
so. I
Yeah,
think so. It's probably equal parts science and equal parts art. I have a suspicion, Axel, I could probably train you how to embalm a body.
I doubt it.
Like I could teach you the ins and outs of it. Like you'd have to get over the hump of being around the dead, but once you're over that, I could train you to do that, and I could probably teach you the little tips and tricks along the way. But I think it probably takes some artistry to do it well. Um, it's an art. It's a kind of art, I guess.
Yeah. Does it ever happen that somebody wants to look completely different in death than they did in life? That somebody has in their will and going out, I really want to look as closely to Meryl Streep as is possible.
Wouldn't that be something? I have never had anybody ask, but I love that idea. Like clown makeup right at the end. But again, I don't know if that would serve the purpose
Yeah.
that seeing your dead provides. But I have had where families like, hey, I brought in mom's makeup, and it's like all of her going out makeup, and it's like, well, I don't think we're gonna use all this. Like heavy dark eyeshadow on closed eyelids that stay closed. Like not really a good look.
Right.
So yeah, it's
Um,
it's a toss up. But for the most part, yeah, it just kind of a neutral sort of look, and an everyday sort of look is what I try to go for because that's how we most often see each other. Or glasses, like you're wearing glass. Do you wear glasses all the time, Axel?
yeah, pretty
Yeah,
much.
I do too. And like, you don't sleep with your eyes closed with your glasses on, but I think having your glasses in the casket is helpful.
Mm.
So yeah, just all the little things kind of come together to form a whole.
Yeah. So before you get to the stage of, there's your corpse and it's beautifully, designed artistically,
Yeah.
designed so that it gives comfort to the bereaved, you receive the bereaved. They come to your funeral parlor, to your funeral home. And I wanted to ask you, what's that like? That must be very difficult sometimes. Is it an alienating? Is it a lonely experience?
Well, it's interesting because I think death is really wonderful in some ways. You've heard it described as a great equalizer, right? And this is something that we're all going to do. Like there is going to be a day in the future, I'm going to die. Hopefully in my bed, but I don't know. And there's a day in the future that you're going to die. So like well, you will, but you're going to be a very old man. You're going to be
Very.
130 years
Oh,
old.
thank you.
You're going to break all the records. But after you break all the records and you do die, it's kind of lovely in the fact that we all have it in common. Like it shouldn't really be a lonely experience because everybody who's ever been in a history book has already done it. Can't be that hard. But also, I think death is kind of a lonely experience too, because you do take that last step into eternity alone. You don't have your husband or wife with you. You don't have your children with you or your friends with you. You're just kind of off by yourself.
Yeah, for all we know.
Yeah, yeah, but being that everyone's done it, like maybe there's something that's not so scary about that. On the practical end, about receiving a dead body, um, if it's in the hospital, I'll go get them from the morgue. So that I do by myself. If they die at home, then usually their family's with them, and so then you're walking into a terrible and emotional situation to take their loved one away from them. But generally, I think it's good. I think families are happy when I show up
Hmm.
because they don't know what to do next. And I have done this thing, even though I haven't died yet. I don't know what that's like.
Yeah,
But I do know very much what the next practical steps a person can take
yeah.
are.
But
And so
it's
they're
a
usually pretty happy when I show up.
I got to imagine. Yeah, it's a hugely stressful experience, though, in many instances, because you've just undergone this experience of having lost someone, and now you have to make all these practical choices, right? Sort of which of your beautiful urns to choose, and which casket, and which
Yeah. And
ceremony,
that's
and
and that's hard because I don't really like pushing merchandise very much, Axel. So even if a casket is very beautiful, like it's practically just as good as any other casket because it has a top and a bottom and handles. Same with an urn. They're all more or less the same. Uh, Here's a question for you. Have you had any deaths in your family or friends, Axel, that you can talk about?
So yes, I have several, and they started early in my life. My mum died when I was 10.
Oh
And
gosh.
that's a life forming
Yeah.
experience.
You never really get over that.
You never really get over that. No, you form your life around it, I think. And this is one of the sort of reasons why I'm so interested in talking to you, because you will have received people like how I was then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like your mom.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So does that have any impact on kind of what you've done for a living too? Do you think?
That's a great question. And I think it's very difficult to say exactly what leads to what in a
Yeah.
person's life, right?
Isn't
We're
that
not
true?
we're not
So
like a
true.
scientific process. But I got to imagine, the reason why I'm a philosophy professor, why I'm interested in, these deep questions to do with life and death, are actually informed, by my life experiences, including that one. I mean, you say about yourself that, your reason for doing what you do also has to
Yeah.
do with your life experiences. Is that right?
Absolutely. I took the more literal approach. Dealt with death a lot as a kid and then just became a mortician. But that's no, that's see, and that's the thing. So I have a question for you. Thinking about, when I serve families, because this happens to me, right? I bury young people, um, and I deal with children who are grieving. As someone who did that yourself, what was something that was comforting to you? I would want to know that from a man who's gone through it and is on the other side. As someone who tries to bring comfort to families, like what was something that was important to you back then?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I'll be totally honest with you. The most comforting thing in that situation was when my aunt, and it was at, the coffin at the gravesite, and my aunt took me away from it. And she said, let's go for a walk. And I'll
Yeah.
be eternally grateful for that because, it showed that there's a perspective beyond that. And, we've seen this now, and look, but here's life, right? And we're just going to go for a walk now. And I think that was the
Yeah.
most comforting thing. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, especially when you deal with young families and children. At 10, you're kind of over the hump, I guess. Because like when I deal with small children in families, like grandma's died or something, and they're little kids, they vacillate between like this curiosity. They peer up over the casket edge, and then they like run off and play, and then they come back, right? And they just bounce between these things, and it's kind of lovely. But I suppose at 10, much harder to just disengage and play for a while. Hard to reset.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. Eventually, eventually you do, and eventually it settles. And that's part of, the beauty of it. And you understand, that life goes on for as long as
And you
it
can be
does.
grateful for it too, can't you? Like you can learn to be great. And granted, I buried my best friend, killed himself 6 years ago. 6 years ago, like next week or the week after, pretty soon. And like worst time of my life. I've never been sadder, never been more miserable. Still had to work and do this job. So just that was brought up to the front every single day that my friend was dead. Um, but in some ways, I think even 6 years out, I can be kind of grateful to him for the things that he gave me, but also even just the things that he gave me in death, I've learned to be grateful for. Like when I have a family who's dealing with suicide, like, well, I've dealt very intimately with that now. Not just in the hands-on part, but in like the emotional and spiritual aspects of these, and been just crushed by it. So you're able to kind of relate to people in a different way.
Yeah, I see
And
that.
it takes a while. Like I didn't feel like that year 1 or 2 or 3 or
Yeah.
4, but year 6, I'm thinking I can be more grateful
Mm.
for just the life experience that comes with both with living and with dying. They're all just kind of one and the same in some ways.
Mm. Here's a thought. What do you think about this? It's also okay not to be grateful. It's also okay to
Yeah,
be absolutely furious and
damn straight.
to not come to the conclusion that
Yeah,
eventually
of
everything's
course it
ordered for
is.
the best,
Of course.
because it's
No,
sometimes just bloody not. How about that?
no, no, and it seems unfair, and it's terribly stupid. And like I think about my friend's death, and I think about how rash and foolish it was. But here's the thing: I think with grief, there's no right way to do it, nor is there a time limit. So like you can be mad, like if you believe in a creator, you can be mad at the creator until the day you die that your mom was taken away from you when you were 10. Just as I can be mad that my friend like rashly took his life, even though I loved him very much. And but yeah, I don't think there's any right way or wrong way to grieve. I think every person just kind of goes through it and comes out the other side. And I guess bringing it back around, like loneliness is a part of it. Because I can remember how lonely I felt when Alex died. Um, like lonely for him. Not, I had my wife and kids around. I have other friends I can talk to. Uh, but that hole that kind of develops after a death, you feel lonely for that particular person.
Yes,
There's like
that's
a
right.
special kind of very particular sort of loneliness that only you feel because it's that person in
Mhm.
that particular relationship.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it can never be satiated. It can never really be gotten back,
Yeah. But
you
we,
know?
yeah. So I agree, loneliness in most cases is, about or for somebody in particular. I mean, some people think that there can also be something that's called existential loneliness, where,
Oh, I
it's
believe in
not
that. Sure.
about somebody, but it's just like you feel fundamentally alone in the world. And it's not
Yeah.
because somebody has died, but that's just how you feel. That's conceivable too, right? But what you just said, I think it's really important because loneliness, in the present literature, there's a lot of discussion as soon as you open the paper. There's going to be something about loneliness and the loneliness crisis and epidemic and all of that. And amongst all that, we tend to lose touch of the fact, and I think it is a fact, that loneliness is part of life, as you put it, and it's got a
Yeah.
value. It's like grief. It's not something that you can simply get rid of, like, or
Yes, and
should.
it's particular, no less. If you talk about the loneliness crisis that was happening during COVID, which I experienced a lot of, I will have you know, uh, during that whole time, you had people, you can talk about a crisis, but then talk about an individual, right? Like think about how powerful that kind of loneliness is in the soul of one person, and then magnify it. Like I had little old ladies, uh, they'd be talking to their children through the windows of the nursing home because they couldn't leave. And one of my little old lady friends, who has since departed, she told her daughter, she's like, "Get me out of here. I'm lonely. I'll die in your house. I don't care, but I just don't want to die alone." And God bless her, she did not die alone. She lived until COVID was over. But I mean, just her own feelings of loneliness are gut wrenching.
Mm. Yeah.
And then just magnify that for every person that becomes a statistic. It's got to be part of the human condition. But it's also interesting that it's so particular. Like
Right.
she's lonely, not probably not existentially. She's lonely for her very particular daughter and her very particular grandkids and her very particular kitchen. You know, as harrowing as that is, like how wonderful is it that we have the capability to just could still hone in on particular people and things,
Yes.
even in the midst of like great woe.
People are, of course, often wonderful, and people, of course, are a great source of comfort in the world. What would we be without other people?
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about the particular experience of the mortician Victor Sweeney.
Yeah.
When you are at your job, when you are in the funeral parlor, and you are with a dead person, would you say that you're developing a relationship with that person, or could it as well be, a car that you're polishing or something, like, what's that like?
That, gosh, that's a great question, Axel. I don't know. It's probably a little bit of both. Because when you work hands on with a body, you realize very quickly, like like everyone else, has two arms and two legs and one head, and a torso. And they do start to blend together a little bit. So in that respect, it does kind of become like polishing a car, I guess. Uh, but there are certain times where like the person kind of peaks out from the mundanity. So for instance, um, I do it. So if I'm embalming a body, I do a thing called setting the features, right? Where you position a person's mouth and you close their eyes, and maybe you fill in their cheeks if they're a little gaunt, and you get their hair kind of combed the right direction. And that sort of thing makes a person just like real to you for just a little bit. Like while you're working on that, they're becoming realer and realer and realer. And all of a sudden they look like themselves again, just for a snap. And then you have to go back to the practicalities of getting their body ready and getting the blood out and, making sure their fingertips get embalming fluid so they don't start to dehydrate or desiccate. So like those kind of things, or even being at the bedside, the deathbed of somebody, they very rarely look like themselves. Like their mouths are open and they're usually laying in strange positions. But when you pick someone up in your arms and you carry them to your cot, which is something I like to do. You don't have to do, by the way. You can slide people around in sheets, but usually if they're under 150 pounds, I like to pick them up in my arms. Because one, I think it shows that I care very much, which I do, but also like it makes them very real. It makes them like more than just another body at that moment because, you know, I'm straining a little bit under their weight. Uh, so is it lonely? Like, do I feel like I have a relationship with them? I guess so. I think I like it. Or writing the obituary is a big one for me. When I write an
Mhm.
obituary, you get to kind of know a person a little bit deeper, not just the facts, but as you talk with their family, you get to kind of get this bird's eye view of the person's life and maybe figure out like what are these things that motivated them. And that is like a really wonderful way to make a relationship with a person, even if I didn't know them well. So I guess I do have a relationship. And then if you have these moments of kind of a metaphysical humanity coming through, not just like the humanity of having two arms and two legs, but like
Yeah.
the metaphysical humanity of them coming through to
Mhm.
you. Yeah, I don't think I can be lonely with them because they become real in
Right.
some ways again.
Yeah. Mm.
It's not lonely. I don't really mind like working at night in the funeral home. It's not scary to me.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't feel like I'm surrounded by people either. It's I don't know.
Huh.
I just walk between both worlds all the time, so it's really hard to say. You just snap back and
And
forth between the
forth.
two, and you don't really quite know where or how or why.
Must be some experience. I wanted to talk to you also briefly about funerals. So, funerals can play a massive role in helping the aggrieved. They can also make things worse.
Yeah,
I've
so true.
can you, obviously it'll massively depend on the individual case, but
Always
what's
does.
what's a funeral like that does things well? Like, sort of, and any thoughts on that? Like, anything general you
Well,
can say?
I think a good funeral makes people sad, but it also makes them a little bit happy. I think like a little wistful would be good. You have to have both. I've been to funerals that are all sad, with like just hopelessly sad funerals. And while those are gut wrenching, they strike very deep. I think a funeral that also like leaves people with a little bit of hope or like a little bit of happiness or a little bit of, like I said, wistfulness, like looking back and like being melancholy a little bit, but also knowing that things are going to be okay. That I think is like the key to a good funeral is to have both of those things. Because I've also I don't know how many people, in wanting to spare their families feelings of grief, right? They don't want to be inconvenient. So they don't want to, they want to make sure everything is happy. They want everything to be a celebration. And like celebrating a life is good. I like doing that. It's most of my job, right? Is setting these things up. But I think one can also stray a little too far. And that if you only celebrate and you're only happy and you only dance and clap and sing, um, you miss out on the other half that like someone you loved is gone and they're not coming back. And like, how do you grieve or how do you deal with the only, your own loneliness of that person gone in your life?
Yeah.
If you've left a funeral and just been told everything's great, don't be sad.
Hmm.
Like you need to have both
Hmm.
in proper measure. And finding that balance is tough. I think every person kind of finds that balance within themselves a little bit to just continue to cope. But to have a funeral service kind of present that to you,
Yeah.
to let you be both happy and sad,
Yeah.
is really a great gift. So anybody who's dodging one or the other, I think, is probably doing it wrong, if I may be so bold.
Yeah. I think that, funerals play a huge role in that aspect, in particular in our world. I don't know, what it's like in your small town, but in general, I think it's true to say that sort of death is kind of this taboo topic. Here we are and
Yeah.
we're alive and we're surrounded by this tech and we function and we're successful and all of that. And the fact, and it is a fact, as you kindly pointed out, that one day, you're going to be in that casket or that coffin. We're just blocking that out as best as we can.
Yeah. I mean, and I do that too. I mean, shoot, Axel, I work around this every day. I have my funeral planned. I have my obituary written. I have a headstone designed for myself. But I don't wake up every day just assuming this is going to be the last either. Like I just assume I'm going to have a whole lifetime of days ahead of me. Don't worry about it. Uh, but it is kind of taboo. Interestingly enough, in a small town, it's a little less taboo because you've grown up going to the funerals of all the old people in your town, and then your friends' parents, and maybe your friends and your neighbors, and the lady at the grocery store. You went to her funeral, so it's a little less taboo in a small town. But I remember being a young man and in college and talking to people who'd never been to a funeral, right? Like they found out what I was studying in college, and they were like, "Why would you do that? Do people die every day?" Yeah, thousands of people die every day around the world.
Yeah.
But it's easy to block out, isn't it?
It's very easy to block out. Yeah. And I think we're, sometimes doing a little bit too much of blocking out. Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably a mercy though. It's probably a mercy to block out a little bit. I'd get nothing done if I was only just thinking deeply and sadly about my own short time on this earth.
Yeah.
So
Question for you: in your small town, presumably most people are going to be buried in the cemetery. As you've explained to us, in your wonderful YouTube episodes, you can also be buried elsewhere. There's air burials, there's
yeah,
there's there's
buried
there's
at sea.
forest burials. My
Yeah.
father was buried in a forest, but that was in Europe. Perhaps you don't do that. I don't know. Do you?
It's not big here yet. It's starting to catch on where you'll have like a memorial park or a memorial forest where people can scatter or bury their loved ones' ashes. I could see that catching on. We like, well, I suppose you guys like rules over there too. We really love rules in the state
Mhm.
of Minnesota where I'm at. So slow to change, but I honestly would not be opposed. I love utilizing my cemetery, not just for work, but like we go there for bike rides with the kids and we, play around and play hide and seek behind the headstones. And, like it's good to use your cemetery. So I really wouldn't be opposed if my town was like, hey, we're going to plant a new cemetery on the edge of town. It's in the woods. We're going to have spots where we can bury caskets and spots where we can bury urns and spots where we can scatter or whatever. But, have it to be like a beautiful and useful place. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, I find it incredibly comforting to be able to go into the forest and there's that tree. And the way this works is that it's a cremation and then you put the ash into a decomposable urn and that gets planted at the bottom of the tree. And so the tree basically absorbs your loved person, and so you can go to this tree and hang out with the tree. And in a
Yeah.
way, I find that very comforting.
And like someday that tree is going to fall down and like that's going to be okay too. Like it's all going to be fine. Yeah. I was talking with a friend of mine he's a timber framer, and we were talking about, using stone and wood. So I've been carving headstones in my garage. I'm not very good at it, but I've been doing it. And he's like, "What if we made a wood headstone?" And I was thinking about how lovely it'd be. Like, let's say the base was stone, and then the upper part was white oak or something, which takes a long time to deteriorate, right? Nice hard wood stays up a long time. And what if like your name was on the wood part, and then after 50 or 100 years, it just completely deteriorates, and all you have left is the stone. And then maybe it just has like your initials or something, or maybe like a little saying underneath, right? You couldn't read until 100 years has gone by and like your name is gone. I don't know. I was playing around with that idea of how lovely that would be. That'd be very cool.
That'd be incredibly cool. Yeah, I love that
Yeah.
idea. I love that idea. Yeah. It like, so I was so tempted for this interview to ask you, you said, so you've written down what you want to be on your headstone. And I'm so tempted, but I'm not going to ask what is it that's going to be on your headstone.
Oh,
Because
I'll tell you. You
tell
wanna
me.
know?
Yes,
Yeah.
please. Yeah.
Okay. So my epitaph, I gotta make sure I get it right. But it is, "He has seen much death, but now he has conquered it."
Wow.
Isn't that kind of metal? Wouldn't you love to read that?
Yeah. I'd love
Yeah.
to read that.
He's seen much death, but now he's conquered it. And I like that it's like a little nebulous, like it doesn't, I'm not gonna have like a picture of a hearse on there. That's like a little too on the nose.
Yeah.
But I
You've-
think,
You've
just
conquered it.
letting someone discover that for themselves, maybe like tying into my life's work, but also like all of us are going to see a lot of death,
Yeah.
right? Like maybe I'm not that special, but all the same, that's what I would have.
Right.
If I died tomorrow, that's what I would like on my hands.
Wonderful. Yeah. I think that's a suitable way to end. Our half hour is unfortunately already up. It was
Well,
so wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for making the time for us.
of course. No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. And I really just appreciate the work you're doing. So keep it up.
And you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Loneliness and You, a podcast on the research and experience of loneliness. My guest today was mortician Victor Sweeney. If you want to join the conversation or have suggestions for future episodes, you can email us at lonelinesspod@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at loneliness.pod. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Loneliness and You wherever you get your podcasts to help others find our work. Loneliness and You is produced by Stacey Goldman and myself, Axel Seaman. Our podcast is engineered and edited by Steve Salina. Our introductory sound was designed by Dave Meckin, and our logo art is by Paul Fisher Davies. The podcast is financially supported by Bentley University. Thanks again for listening. Talk soon.